Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. Opportunities today for questions and answers. Feel free to put your question in the question bar. And my name is Ajahn Sona. Let us begin with the first question.
Yes, Ajahn Sona, good morning. And our first question today is going to come to us from Tommy. Is it okay not having any good people or friends in common? Sometimes I feel that being Buddhist and vegan is difficult to talk with others. I read often that when we don't have friends, we get Alzheimer's easier.
There is a lot of connection between community. There's all these studies about religions and the benefits of them. And one of the benefits is community and relationship to things like Alzheimer's or depression, things like that. But we must understand cause and effect here. The Alzheimer is not necessarily caused by the person's lack of community. Their lack of community is maybe caused by their own personality configurations. And that is the underlying cause for the arising of Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's seems to be, these are scientific studies, and also my guess about things is that stress itself is a cause for Alzheimer's. An excessive negative emotional state, long-term negative emotional states, stressful, very clearly wear on a person's the functions of their mind, and apparently their brain as well. I separate the mind and the brain. For me, are not the same. Anyway, apparently the prefrontal cortex can degenerate with long-term stress, and the long-term stress can be associated with trauma in life. Trauma is another word for a wound, and unhealed wound. So, and then you start to get symptoms of lack of emotional control, impulsive behavior, and lack of memory, lack of situational awareness, things like that. But this is not to do with choosing to be a Buddhist and a vegan. If you're living in a hamlet in Texas or someplace like this, where that is not a shared value, you're probably in the wrong place. But with these days, with online community, you can join a community. You're joining one right now, presuming that you're listening. You submitted a question, so you're in a community that understands you very well. There are Buddhists all over the world. We are citizens of the world. Buddhism is not located in a particularly ethnic or a racial context, or a location on geographic location. The idea that it's Indian or something like that is wrong. It's not Indian. It's just anybody who encounters these ideas. It's more like mathematics. Mathematics is not confined to any particular race or creed or geography, location. So you're a citizen of the world, Tommy, and you should join other citizens of the world. These Buddhists. There are online groups, and you might meet people personally through these online groups, but there's Zoom calls. Yesterday I had a Zoom call with Poland, and there's quite a community of Theravada Buddhists, interested Buddhists in Poland. And we made connection. They'd call me up, and I say, sure, let's do a Zoom call. And a couple hundred people were watching and so forth. So there's a lot of community around, online community like never before. And then you may be seeking out good friends. it's better the Buddha says it's better to go alone than with bad company. And a bad company is a fool for company. So somebody who has bad habits, you're a Buddhist, you're abstaining from drugs and intoxication and violence and deception and thievery and things like that. So if you have so-called friends, and they're not really friends, who indulge in this, and you want company, that this is a bad idea. You're much better off going alone than with fools for company. And you won't get Alzheimer's. You're making a clear moral decision, and you're joining a community that is other people who have made clear moral decisions, and you're not willing to compromise on it. That will not contribute to this thing called Alzheimer's. But your buddies that are your so-called friends that are out fooling around and doing stupid things and drunk and stoned and everything are going to get Alzheimer's. Okay, so that's a little discussion about Alzheimer's.
The next question comes to us from Du Tex Mex. Dear Ajahn, I'm reading about Pure Land Buddhism and came across a version called Jodo Shinshu that claims to be the most widely practiced branch of Buddhism in Japan. It's taught that liberation from faith in Amida Buddha's other power and not from any merit or power of one's own. Doesn't this directly contradict the Four Noble Truths, most notably right effort?
Yes, I would say it's 180 degrees off of the original teachings. Other power is just not a Buddhist feature. You benefit by teachers, somebody saying something, but this magical transference of salvationist ideas is not a feature of early Buddhism. It's certainly a feature of Christianity, though. So you got a choice. You can be a Jodo Shinshu or a Christian. And not all Christians believe that that you're saved exclusively through some sort of mystical merit of Christ or something like that. There's also commitment to moral commitments and behavioral things. But certain sects of Christianity also don't really care about your sinful nature or anything like that. You're going to be saved through the grace of Christ or God or whatever. These are very, very different than the teachings of the Buddha, and this is why I'm not a Christian and I'm not a Jodo Shinshu or a Pure Land practitioner whatsoever. And it's not because I just I wasn't raised Buddhist or anything. I searched the world over. I looked at all the philosophies and the religions and so forth, and I sampled and considered and even experimented with, but the choice I made as an early Buddhist, Theravada or pre-Theravada even, is a very deliberate choice based on this fact that one is responsible for one's actions in life, and that no one purifies another. This is a very, very important principle. No one purifies another, and no one dispurifies another. No one sins and transfers that to you, and no one transfers their purity to you. This would eliminate altogether the notion of karma. Karma is intentional moral action. This is a very, very important revolution in human history. And the Buddha is saying each person is morally responsible for their thought, their speech, and their action. And this moral responsibility cannot be absolved by external agents or by rites and rituals. So the world at the time, the ancient world, was full of rites and rituals. And there was no, in a sense, personal responsibility. In a sense, the Buddha is creating the idea of an individual. Before that, you were in a society, a religious structure, and whatever the society, usually run both by kings and priests. And the priests would get messages from heaven, and it would be corroborated by the king, or the king would want certain things done, and the priests would back him up. Sometimes the priests would oppose him. But it was considered that the state was your ruler, and that whatever they told you to do, you did. And it wasn't a matter of personal conscience. And right up to the Second World War, remember that the war crimes were adjudicated on there was this saying, I was doing my duty, I was just doing my job. A soldier's just doing his job. But that turned out not to be an excuse. Soldiers can't just do what they're told, because if they do what they're told and it crosses moral boundaries, then they're responsible. So this is the idea. This is the problem in all of human history. Where do we draw the lines as individuals? And magical thinking, like somebody else outside me can remove all my sins and so forth, and what I do doesn't matter, is, I would say, it's not just another version, but it's a rather evil idea. Yes.
The next question is from Dhamma NYC. When I doubt the Buddha's teachings on rebirth, I think if there was no rebirth, then suffering would end after this life, so it's safer to practice like there is rebirth. Is this analysis correct?
Yeah, something like that. We can't all know, the truth of rebirth. It's possible, because of past life memories, it's possible to know that rebirth takes place. From religions that start with out of nothing, and then something happens after death, you go to heaven or something, it's very hard to confirm such a thing, because you would not have had the experience before. But in religions that have the idea of past lives, it's possible to access that very experience through memory. So you can actually have direct memory experiences of previous lives, having lived and died. But not everybody has these memories. And more or less they have to take it on faith. What the proposition is that if there is no life after this, then you will never find that out. You will never actually have the direct experience of confirming the fact that you were right. If you bet that there is no life after this life, you will never actually have the experience of finding out you were right? Because you don't exist. You can only find out you were wrong. So rebirth is a bet that you do have a life after this, and there's only one thing you can find out about that belief that you had, and that is that you were right. You can't find out you were wrong, right? You can't find out you were wrong, that there is no life after this, that there is a life after this. You can't find out you were wrong, that there is a life after this, because if there isn't, you don't experience that. By the way, suffering does not end. If you hold the view that life is just annihilation, you're annihilated at the end of this life, and that's a very common belief in the modern world. You just die, and that's it. You cannot say that means that ends suffering. That does not end suffering for the individual who dies. The reason why is that you can only experience existence. And with that theory in mind of annihilation, you exist and you don't experience the cessation of existence. You can't experience the cessation of your own existence. Do you understand why? You would have to exist in order to experience the cessation of existence. So that philosophy, actually, most people haven't really thought it through. They think you just die, and they often think that religious people are afraid of dying, so therefore they manufacture this idea that you don't really die. But what's implicit in the idea of annihilation at death is also that you do not experience death. You can't experience anything except existence. And therefore, you simply suffer in your existence, but you're not relieved of that suffering by death. There is nobody to feel relief or the absence of suffering. You simply suffer, and others around you, they see that you're dead, and they might say, oh, well, they're out of their suffering now. No, they're not out of their suffering. They don't exist. It's like saying a square triangle is happy now. There is no square triangle. There are no square triangles, and they don't feel anything. So there are no dead people, and they don't feel anything. They're not relieved. They're not resting in peace. They're not doing anything, and they're not out of their suffering. There's only, from an annihilationist point of view, you simply suffer, and that's all. And you don't experience death. So that's more or less like a religious commitment. It relieves. First of all, there's no consequences to your life as well. So you don't have any concern about moral negativities that you've done in your life as having consequences after death. So you're free. You feel unburdened from moral responsibility. But you will never find out if you were right about that. You can only find out you were wrong about that. And secondly, you have a secret teaching, which you may not be conscious of. And the secret teaching is that you're not going to die. Strangely enough, the commitment to annihilationism at death has a secret inside of it, is that you won't experience death. In order to experience death, you have to exist. And that means that you would continue beyond death. So think about that, chew on that. You will find out it's logically impeccable. Let's go on to the next question.
Yeah, the next question, and I'm going to jump around the chat just a little bit today. The next question comes to us from Victoria from Poland. Dear Ajahn, the practice helps me grow, but sometimes I feel overwhelmed by the sheer number of topics and concepts. How can I practice to stay close to what's important?
Yes, just choose very few. The simile is there's a raft that helps you get across a river. This guy makes a raft to help him swim across the river. It's not a raft that you actually ride on. It's just a bunch of sticks that keep you from drowning. It's like a life preserver. And you kick with both feet and you paddle with both hands. And you're resting your chest on this bundle of sticks. That bundle of sticks are a few selected teachings from the vast number of teachings that the Buddha gives in the early suttas. The summary of the teachings is the 37 requisites of enlightenment. And I've given, I think, 12 talks on the 37 requisites of enlightenment on this YouTube channel. So look it up if you want. And that the Buddha says, basically that's it. That's the whole package. These are all the essential teachings in a bundle. And I even have codified it into a simple thing. It's a phone number, 875-5444. And it will help you remember it. But everything packs into the Eightfold Path, basically. And the Eightfold Path can be simplified into virtue, concentration, wisdom. These are the fundamental three things. The big problem in life is greed, hatred, and delusion. the answer to that is generosity, kindness, and clarity. So you practice anything that increases your generosity, kindness, and clarity, and you reduce anything that conduces to greed or hatred or delusion, confusion. So they can be reduced to a very small handful of teachings that are deal with most of the problems of existence.
The next question is from Dominic from Sweden via Poland. Dear Ajahn Sona, I would like to know your opinion on the age limit for becoming a monk. Isn't 50 years old too old for starting the monastic life?
Well, my opinion doesn't matter. The Buddha did not have an upper limit to there is no age upper limit for becoming a monk. But if you're infirm or you have an illness, a limb missing or something like that, or you have some cognitive limitations, then those are what would exclude a person, not their age. It doesn't mean that automatically if you're 50 years old or 70 years old or something that you'd simply be accepted if you don't have any physical defects or major incurable illnesses. There would be a period of observation and assessment of your whole personality and so forth, and you may not be suitable for monastic life. But in Asia, there are numbers of people who have become a monk at 60 years old. They're grandfathers, and they go off to become a monk. They renounce their family, they leave, they go off, become a monk. The youngest, you can't be a fully ordained bhikkhu before 20 years old. You can become a novice probably at the age of 8 or 10 even. But you cannot take full ordination until you're 20 years old. But there isn't any upper limit to this. And there are some cases in the suttas of people becoming monks at 80 years old and attaining enlightenment. You probably would not be able to do it in the West because we do have demographics. If we can't, all the monks in the West, and there's not that many, there's handfuls of monasteries and monks in the West. They can't all afford to be 80 at the same time. They need to try to spread the possibilities out. So they would probably favor younger people rather than older people. Yeah.
The next question is from No One to Be from the United Kingdom. Dear Ajahn, some monks describe seeing and interacting with ghosts. Do monks have special powers to see them, or do ghosts choose to make themselves seen by monks more often than to lay people?
Yeah, it would seem that certain people see ghosts or feel ghosts. And that seems to be a sort of a special sensitivity, rather than the ghost merely choosing to appear. It seems that certain people are perceptive of these things. So it's a sensitivity or something like that. And it might be enhanced by meditation. First of all, you're going to get a collection of, if you go to a music school, you're going to get a collection of people that are like music, and they're a certain portion of the population. Not everybody is obsessed by music or enraptured by music or have create music in their heads and so forth. This is a portion of the population, and there's going to be a portion that are mathematicians and so forth, and other people are just not interested. Physicists, mathematicians, people in the arts, literature, writers, poets, they see things that other people don't see. Einstein sees, relativity in the universe. And how did that escape our attention since it was always there? How did nobody notice that before? This is the nature of certain capacities of humans. And it seems that it tends to be higher in monastic circles, perhaps. Not because of belief structures either. The whole cultures in Asia have a belief that there are ghosts. Sort of ghosts are in a kind of a parallel dimension that every now and then drifts over into this dimension, you know. So it seems they appear to one who has the apparatus to see them. In modern scientific technological society, there's a whole philosophy that there is no such thing. It couldn't be because you are absolutely annihilated at death and so forth. But that is a commitment. That's not necessarily. We cannot demonstrate that necessarily. They're putting together some things, in a commitment to the idea that the body is. The totality of the mind is contained within the body in physical structures. And that when that ceases, then the mind ceases, consciousness ceases. And that is it hasn't been demonstrated in a completely irrefutable way.
The next question is from CLB 105. When it feels like I'm getting close to absorption, I begin to feel fear of having an ecstatically overwhelming experience. Do you have any advice for overcoming this delusion and fear of anatta here?
Well, I wouldn't call it a fear of anatta. Anatta means selflessness. Samadhi experiences are not unnecessarily anatta experiences. They're concentration experiences where the mind is not drifting. People get a little bit nervous about controlling their own mind. They're a little bit afraid of that. What you should be afraid of is living with an uncontrolled mind, a mind that can plunge into sorrow and depression and confusion. Why would you be afraid of a mind that plunges into ecstasy? Ecstasy, by the way, means basically out of your senses, meaning out of a preoccupation with sights and sounds, smells, tastes, touches, or even ideas. And that is what this samadhi is, this jhana samadhi, is withdrawal from the external world of the senses into the internal world where the mind is not preoccupied with these things. And it's a great place of refreshment, stillness, and inherently, if you can get into it, the primary emotion right in the early stages of the samadhi is joy. And what's to be feared about joy? And ease of body. What's to be feared with ease of body? So you both. This is not taking. You're not taking a hallucinogen. It's not about hallucinations or visions of God or anything like this. This is silence. This is mental health. It's ultimately a high state of mental well-being and emotional health. That's what you would be experiencing. So there's nothing to be feared in that.
The next question comes to us from Zuri from Washington, United States. This question is from my mother, Janie, and she asks, is it helpful to have brief meditations, say 10 minutes 3 times a day?
Yes, very helpful. Very helpful. 10 minutes 3 times a day is very, very good. Indeed. Yeah.
The next question is from Yalu from Sweden. Do Buddhists who realize the three characteristics of all conditioned phenomena Do Buddhists who realize the three characteristics of all conditioned phenomena experience the dark night of the soul, which originated from the Catholics?
Well, I don't think the dark night of the soul originated from the Catholics. The dark night of the soul is a kind of a universal experience of the movement, with the questioning of the nature of reality and existence. We would, perhaps in modern times, we'd call this existential anxiety. But, you either stay an unthinking party animal, which is shallow and full of sorrow at the same time, especially the day after or when you're nursing a hangover. Or you think, is there anything meaningful to this whole trip, this existence thing? What's the point of this? Why am I alive? Is there something I should be doing? Are there any rules for this game or not? Because you're thrust into the game. It's the game. Life is the game that must be played. And you have to make the choices about how to play it. And so this can result in a dark night of the soul because you're exploring and you're uncertain. You're not convinced. You're full of doubt, and the doubt grips you existentially. So this can happen when Buddhism keeps repeating that everything's transient and you're going to lose everything that you love, beloved. Everything you have, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from you. That's something to be repeated on a regular basis. That's the Buddha is very relentlessly reminding you that there's no way out of this. You have to lose everything. One way or the other. You lose it in this life, or you die and you lose it. So that produces some sort of terror or anxiety in people, but it's obvious. It's a fact right in front of your face. And if you face it with the wrong attitude, you get the dark night of the soul. If you face it with the right attitude, though, you can bring tranquility and ease to the experience. And then the truth prevents this shock and suffering. When people don't keep in mind that everything can be lost, they are shocked, shaken, and in sorrow because they haven't faced reality and they don't know how to react to reality. But Buddhism is basically giving you shock absorbers by going through carefully what can and will happen in life and how to react to it carefully. You are being given a safety course, how not to be shocked and distressed. So it's not like the dark night of the soul is valuable. It just happens that people, when they're not very experienced, they, including in Buddhism, that these new ideas, this facing reality, can throw you off. It's not what ordinary people talk about, and it's a new way of thinking. And it takes a while to get used to it. But in the end, you're glad you did, because it's shock-proofing. Okay.
The next question from the chat is from Malachite. Ajahn, I have gone to my local monastery about an hour and a half away 3 weekends in a row, but I can't get myself to pull into the parking lot. What is a good way to work past this anxiety?
Your local monastery, what are you afraid of? You make your voyage all the way there. It's like you're going on a blind date or something. Like you set up the date and then you show up to the restaurant and they're sitting in the inside and then you chicken out. I don't know what monastery you're going to and so forth, but, first of all, go to an online monastery like this. You're in an online monastery right now. You're sitting in front of a monk, having your questions answered, and, how do you feel? Is it a terrifying experience or not? Why would it be terrifying? So, watch videos of monasteries, of the procedures in monasteries. You're a layperson, so the monks will be very polite and helpful to you. Monastics will be helpful to you. They realize you're a layperson. And especially in the West, they don't expect you to know any of the protocols of Buddhism. They're going to expect you not to know. There will be people there from the West that have been practicing for 20 years, 30 years even, 40 years, and they know all the ins and outs of it. But there's always new people coming through the door that don't know a darn thing. And if the monks are sensible and wise, they perfectly well know that you need to introduce people, you need to make them feel comfortable and be friendly, not fearful, not fear-causing. So if you go to that monastery and they treat you badly, they make you afraid and all that kind of stuff, don't go back to that monastery. Go to another one that's friendly. Okay.
The next question is from Natalia from Greece. Dear Ajahn, I have heard Thai forest teachers teach that a universal, non-self-consciousness continues after parinibbana, and that Buddhas and Arahants can appear to meditators through nimittas, with the 5 aggregates temporarily activated for communication, as in Ajahn Mun's biography. How should we interpret these teachings? Is this a Dhamma interpretation? I don't get it.
Yeah. There was a famous biography of Ajahn Mun written by Ajahn Mahabua, wherein it was apparently Ajahn Mun disclosed to Ajahn Mahabua that he had been visited by the Buddha and a number of his Arahant disciples in a cave and congratulating him on being an Arahant or something like that. There were a number of other disciples that were with Ajahn Mun, and none of them ever heard that from Ajahn Mun. So either only Ajahn Mahabua heard that and nobody else, or maybe it didn't happen. So I can't tell you definitively that it didn't happen, but none of and I've talked directly to senior monks who were with Ajahn Mun, and he died, I think, in 1948 or 49, I think it was. And he, they lived with Ajahn Mun and heard many, many teachings from him, and did not ever hear him speak of this. So, and I asked them specifically because I'm very curious about this. This is completely unorthodox. It's outside there is no report in the entirety of the Pali Canon, including the commentaries, of the Buddha appearing with his disciples to any monk. Simply doesn't happen. And so this would be like, for 2,500 years, this never happened. Then suddenly it happened to Ajahn Mun. And he only told one other monk. So I discount the story. I set it aside as not part of the entire history of Theravada Buddhism. It is, of course, very, very controversial. When it came out, most of the educated monks in the world dismissed it, said, it's just fantasy. So that was the reaction. It was, the book itself was sent to the what is it? The polytext? No, not the polytext. The BPS, the Buddhist Publication Society, whose editor at that time was Venerable Nyanaponika, and eventually Bhikkhu Bodhi became the editor of that. When Nyanaponika read that, he coughed politely and sent it back and said, this is completely outside of the realm of any kind of orthodox Theravada Buddhism, so please revise this. Ajahn Mabu is a very strong character, and he refused to revise it and published it as it was. But it set off a firestorm of derision and criticism. So that's the context of it. As far as the luminous mind or the post-parinibbana consciousness, this again is something that's been discussed in Theravada Buddhism from the beginning. What happens at the death of an arahant is their persisting consciousness. It seems from the suttas and the Abhidhamma that there isn't. It seems fairly plain. The only way you can explain it is by a very few odd sort of fragments that maybe occur once or twice in the suttas and need interpreting to suggest a continuance of some sort. In general, it seems that in the sutta, the suttas certainly up to the 5th century AD with Buddhaghosa, the consensus was it's simply there is cessation of the 5 khandhas, and the 5 khandhas are all. There's nothing more than 5 khandhas. The body, perception, feeling, consciousness, volitions. And there are sort of variations of this, but they're all basically, for convenience sake, they're held to be the all. They're all that we are. Any little subcategories are basically included in that. And there is nothing outside of that or within that that constitutes a so-called atta or self, including a kind of a luminous consciousness or consciousness itself. In modern times, in the last century or two, in the West, there's been an interest in what's philosophy of language, that we can formulate sentences which are apparently meaningful but don't really, on closer inspection, are empty of meaning. That you can talk about square triangles. If we could just put a square triangle over here and so forth, and then it sounds like I said something, but when you realize there are no square triangles, that anything that talks about square triangles simply is nonsense. It's just empty air. So this is when we talk about consciousness itself without being conscious of something or a type of consciousness of something. Are we really saying anything? Is there such... To speak of consciousness, when we speak of consciousness, it means that there is awareness of something. When you simply say awareness, but you don't say awareness of something, what are you talking about? It's inconceivable. But yet that language is sometimes used. It's sometimes used in certain Hindu teachings, Advaita teachings, and some of the Buddhist sect teachings, but basically, is it meaningful or is it really empty language? Are we talking about square triangles here? Awareness itself. So this is the kind of the criticisms that we would bring to it. The Buddha himself at the end of his life said, after my death, neither humans nor gods will see me. That is his dying declaration in the Parinibbana Sutta. Don't get the idea that the Buddha's in heaven waiting for you. or in Nibbana, as if Nibbana is a place and he's waiting for you, and sometimes he comes and appears to you and everything. This is quite the opposite of what we would expect to hear in Christianity. People are seeing Christ all the time. He's in a place, etc. This is not the case with the Buddha, So these are the schools, and I say that there's a lot more. It's easier to formulate the idea that the Buddha spoke of the cessation of the five khandhas as that's it, it's done. And it's harder to make the case, like as an attorney, as a philosopher, for continuation. Yeah.
The next question is from Malafond 33. Would you talk about the usage of adhitthana in meditation practice? I would greatly appreciate your point of view.
Adhitthana means determinations, like making fixed resolutions. We do this every New Year's Eve, right? You make your resolutions. You're going to quit smoking, or you're going to quit drinking, or you're going to stop overeating. You got to lose some weight. You're going to determine, okay, I'm not going to eat desserts for a month, and so forth. This is generally a good idea. Doesn't matter that sometimes you fail at it. If you don't make any determinations, you won't keep any determinations. Resolution is probably the better resolutions. About practice, say you decide you're going to meditate every morning for, the rest of your life, etc. These are good things to do, and we have to make resolutions in life. If you don't make resolutions, you just, end up weighing 1,000 pounds and dying in a room that you can't get out of. Nobody can get you out of the room because you weigh half a ton. So you have to say, okay, I got to stop eating. I've got to lose weight. And this is just part of, whether you like it or not, it's part of human existence. If you want to live a decent life, you must make resolutions, and you must be firm in your resolutions, and you must keep your resolutions. It's very important, yeah.
Next question is from Ermina in Poland. I have joy from generosity, but I don't see any difference in the level of my joy due to the material worth of my gift. Does it work this way, that the financial amount of a gift doesn't have any difference in the level of joy, or is it my personal individual feeling? How does this work from a karmic perspective?
Well, it's a personal experience. A small gift, you might experience a little bit of joy, but you might experience a very great joy. Like a little plastic toy that you give to a child. It can be very delightful to see their joy in it. The mother gives a present, or a grandparent, or the uncle or aunt or cousin or friend gives a present to a child, and they're just exquisitely delighted by it. And it brings great smiles and enjoyment to the person who gives. And another person might give, $500,000 to charity, and they also experience joy. But is it 500,000 times greater or not? No, I don't think so. But the joy of giving substantial, important things, lasts a long time. It's also in the repercussions. Great gifts bring great results to the person who has given them. So you should always enjoy giving. Before you give, you should enjoy the fact that you're about to give. While you're giving, you enjoy the fact of giving, and then afterwards, you should reflect and recollect the giving and enjoy the again. Don't hesitate to enjoy your generosity. And the more you enjoy it, the better it is. That's the great skill of enjoyment of giving. And feel free to do so. But obviously, there's a difference between a tiny gift and a large gift, especially in the results of it. The results are also in the person that you're giving it to. If just feeding a bird, is different than feeding a human. If a bird needs some nourishment, that's one thing. But if a human does, it's another thing. And if the human is of exalted status, if you're giving a meal to the Buddha, then it's of greater consequence. Yeah.
The next question is from Questator from Melbourne, Australia. Is stream entry marked by a cessation event? If so, is this different to the stage beyond the eighth jhana?
The stage beyond the eighth jhana, there is something called cessation of perception and feeling, which is so-called beyond the eighth jhana. It's not a cessation of perception and feeling. What is this? Is cessation of ignorance. You have suddenly understood something about reality and about an attitude to reality. That's the stream entry, the first stage of enlightenment. And so what has ceased? Your previous ignorance has ceased. So that's the main component of it. It's not cessation of perception and feeling, it's a cessation of ignorance, of a portion of ignorance, yeah.
The next question is from BFCR1TI. Hello, Ajahn. The contrast between my time spent in retreats and the cacophony of lay life makes it hard to see how it will be possible for me to stay in touch with the Dhamma. Do I just sit more?
Well, you shape your life in a skillful way, which does not neglect your duties as a layperson, because you will feel guilty and negligent if you don't manage to make your rent payments or your mortgage payments or occasionally see your relatives or something like this. So you'll feel that you're not adequately living your appropriate life. So if you're a layperson, you have to deal with what you have to deal with, the necessities and practicalities of life. But you don't have to just live in a scrambled way. You don't have to conform to you don't have to accept every invitation to a party. You start to carefully and skillfully decline some invitations. You schedule your holidays to go to a quiet cottage in the forest rather than on a Disneyland cruise, This is how you start to shape your life as a more serene experience that stays closer in touch with Dhamma and avoids the madding crowd. There's a book called Far from the Madding Crowd. By the way, it's not maddening crowd, it's madding. The madding crowd. I like it. The use of English in these 19th century novels is fantastic. Okay, so one more question.
The last question from today comes to us from Casper from Poland. Dear Ajahn, could you speak about ADHD, which results in a rapid loss of attention throughout the day? How can I make use of this brain condition?
Well, you need to retrain your brain, and whatever it takes. And breath meditation is one of the best ways. So watching the breath, counting the exhalations of the breath from 1 to 5. So when you breathe out, that's 1. Don't bother with the inhalation. And then 2, 3, up to 5. And then just back to 1. And then you'll know when your mind has wandered, you will lose your count. And you might even have to kind of, on the exhalation, you might have to count like this. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. So that you don't lose the number. After you do that for a while, the mind starts to get a little trained, and then you can go to just 1, 2. And then you'll lose your count. You'll forget that you were at 3. So don't be frustrated or anything. Just go back to 1. So you're just counting up to 5 and then going back to 1. If you lose the count, you go back to 1. And you do cycles and cycles of this. Do it for, when you first do it, do it for 10 minutes. And then build up to 15 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe even half an hour. So you set alarms so you don't have to pay attention to the clock. Just after a half an hour, your alarm goes off. And you can see where you are. So you keep doing this until you can actually sustain attention, you don't lose your count. Then you can see if you can just stay with the breath without the counting. And that's a much harder task. But this training is extraordinary training, and everybody needs to train their mind like this. Everybody has some degree of ADHD. It's just a matter of how much. Even a person, a great classical pianist in the midst of a concert at Carnegie Hall, their mind might flicker out, and right in the middle of a Bach fugue, which is incredibly complex and requires great attention, they might think of something else in a strange way. The mind flickers, So everybody has to face this, and it's just a matter of degree. And the worse your attention is, the more you need to exercise do these exercises to train the mind into paying attention. And it becomes much more trainable. It's training like training a dog's mind as well, training a dog to come and sit. And instead of running around, digging up the neighbor's garden and running into traffic and barking and getting in a fight, the dog starts to come when you call it. It sits, it goes for a walk with you. It's a very nice companion. The mind untrained is a nuisance, just as an untrained dog is a nuisance, and a dog that is trained becomes a very great companion, and the mind itself becomes your best friend when trained. So we will end today with those questions, and we will be back hopefully next week.